I told him I was bored with our perfect love story, and by sunrise all proof that I'd ever existed was gone from his world. Everyone always said Mason and I were the couple other couples studied for cheat sheets. 3 years of marriage, 5 years of dating before that, a bright loft in Chicago's West Loop, with succulents on every windowsill and color-coded books on the shelves. Friends swore we were relationship Pinterest. Mason never forgot an anniversary. He planned microbreweries into our road trips because he knew I liked taking artsy photos of flight paddles. When I had deadlines, he brewed a fresh Chemex at midnight and perched on the sofa until I hit send. I'm Valerie, 29, a copywriter by day, by night, the kind of woman who posts candlelit dinners to stories with the caption, "With my forever." At least that's who I was until the idea that forever might be limiting snuck in. The whispers started small, half a glass of rosé in at my friend Bree's condo. Bree is the one who still calls 30 the junior league and treats Tinder like grocery delivery. "Val, you got cuffed at 26. That's adorable. Like adopting a golden retriever before you travel the world. Aren't you curious what else is out there?" I laughed it off, but the question hung on my ribcage. 2 weeks later, Tessa, my work wife, sighed over pad thai and said, "Mason is sweet, but comfort can become a cage if you don't stretch your wings first." I played it back later, the alliteration landing like a lyric. Little irritations I'd once found charming began to itch. Mason sang the same 3 lines of any song before switching to a new one. Suddenly it grated. His way of lining sneakers by the door so they formed a little smiling arc? It felt like clutter now. I scrolled through feeds of old classmates skydiving in New Zealand, dating DJs in Berlin, living more. I convinced myself I wasn't planning to end anything. I just needed proof that choosing Mason wasn't a mistake of limited sampling. One Wednesday, standing at the tall counter while he sliced peppers for fajitas, I heard myself say, casual as weather, "Do you ever think maybe we rushed into monogamy? I mean, neither of us has really experienced life as adults on our own." Mason set the knife down leisurely, wiped the board, and asked what I needed to feel experienced. I hadn't expected earnest empathy. I mumbled something about travel, about meeting more people, about not wanting to wake up at 40 and wish for a do-over. He nodded, forehead creased, kissed my temple, said we'd talk more. But talking more meant facing how little I'd actually thought it through, and avoidance is easier than introspection. So I let the question dangle, and the apartment filled with a faint electric tension neither of us named. 6 weeks later, the tension found its shape in the person of Conrad, our new UX consultant with silver rings and a grin that looked photoshopped. That was the beginning of the temptation spiral I swore I'd never narrate. Conrad breezed into the agency like he'd been poured out of a Spotify ad, tattoos peeking from rolled cuffs, a voice that could double as late-night radio. My first real conversation with him was a 40-minute riff about indie typography, while Mason texted me pictures of our dinner ingredients, asking whether I preferred lime or lemon zest. Comparison is the thief of joy, they say. It's also the dealer for dissatisfaction. Bree fanned the flame daily. "Office crushes are like exfoliating facials," she declared during Pilates. "They slough off dead monotony." Tessa doubled down. "Flirtation is free cardio." I started staying late under the pretext of fixing microcopy, which meant long chats with Conrad over cold brew and neon post-its. He listened, really listened, eyes scanning my face like there was something hide-and-seek behind each sentence. Mason listened too, but by then familiarity had camouflaged his attention. Nothing physical happened for the first month, but my phone became a second pulse. Slack threads turned private threads turned encrypted. I rationalized, emotional affairs aren't real if you never touch. I repeated it like a spell each night. I crawled into bed beside Mason's steady breathing. One Friday, a thunderstorm canceled the Blue Line and Conrad offered me a ride. The car smelled like bergamot and midnight decisions. On a red light pause at Ashland and Lake, he brushed a raindrop off my cheek. My heart misfired. The kiss landed like skipping a meal and standing up too fast, dizzy and exhilarating. By the time we reached my building, we'd mapped 1,000 unspoken possibilities. That kiss detonated restraint. Over the next 6 weeks, our affair sprinted from stolen conference room moments to Saturday strategy sessions in boutique hotels. The dopamine was ridiculous. Every ping from him felt like being handed a bouquet of spotlight. Meanwhile, Mason planned our anniversary getaway to Door County, oblivious. I pretended I was overloaded at work, that I needed solo weekends to catch up on briefs. My justifications evolved nightly. I'm conducting field research on desire. I'll come back wiser, more certain that Mason is my endgame. I convinced myself I was the protagonist of a modern self-actualization film. But even romantic comedies have B-plots. Mason's once predictable attentiveness grew strained. He stopped singing in the morning. He stared at his phone longer when I left the room. He started journaling, something he'd never done. I ignored the clues until a Tuesday in late September. I'd stayed at Conrad's place pretending I was pulling an all-nighter on a product launch. At 6 a.m., I padded into our apartment, shoes in hand, only to find Mason sitting on the couch, laptop open to my shared iCloud account, screenshots of messages glowing like police flashers. My tongue went numb. He didn't yell. He simply asked, "How long?" I gave the diluted version, 6 weeks, not 12, claiming confusion, claiming burnout. He nodded, said nothing. I texted Bree in panic. "He found out. What do I do?" She replied, "Cry, blame stress, promise therapy. He'll cool off." Tessa sent a thumbs-up emoji. Neither answer felt like a life raft. That night, Mason didn't come home. The anniversary suitcase I hadn't known about was gone, along with his guitar and the denim jacket that smelled like cedar. The silence in the loft was no longer electric. It was vacuum. I waited for anger. Doors slammed, voice raised, bargaining. Instead, I got nothing. Mason was executing a disappearing act so graceful it terrified me more than revenge. He left a single post-it on the kitchen island. "Don't clean the espresso machine. I've already said goodbye to it." That was it. I spent the next 48 hours in whiplash. Half the time I rehearsed apologies. The other half I raged that he'd walk away without a fight. Isn't begging supposed to happen now? That's how my reset was scripted. Instead, my calls went to voicemail after one ring. Our shared calendar went blank except for a new all-day event Mason created. Freedom. Bree diagnosed it as male ego backlash. "Trust me, once he sleeps on some friend's futon and misses your pillow spray, he'll crawl back." I wanted to believe her, but Mason wasn't a futon guy. He was a systems guy. Systems guys don't crawl. They rebuild. On Friday, an email pinged my work inbox from HR. Internal investigation into inappropriate conduct with a contractor. Conrad had been named. I was CC'd. Apparently, Mason hadn't torched me. Conrad's ex-girlfriend had. Chaos at the agency crescendoed. Conrad's contract suspended. My creative director frostier than a Chicago February. Yet even that humiliation felt secondary to the absence blooming at home. Mason's toothbrush was gone, but the damp outline on the shelf remained, like chalk around a body. The loft became a museum to a relationship suddenly deceased. Pear mugs with only mine in rotation, the dent in the sofa where his laptop had lived, playlists that now cut mid-song because the account link was severed. At 3 a.m., I'd shake from caffeine and guilt, scrolling through our photo archive, hoping to resuscitate certainty. Each perfect image looked like counterfeit money. I tried texting Mason's sister, Lena, the only relative who'd ever liked me enough to share memes. Her reply was 3 sentences. "He's safe, he's with family, please respect his boundaries." Translation: "You're not family anymore." Meanwhile, Conrad vanished too. Corporate badge deactivated. Slack icon perpetually offline. The dopamine dealer had closed shop, leaving me with a withdrawal headache and no actual drug. For the first time, I noticed how loud an unplugged fridge hum feels when you're the sole heartbeat in 900 square feet. I realized I'd traded a love song for elevator music, and the ride was stuck between floors. Mason's disappearance became the city's most polite ghost story. He didn't block me. He archived me. Phone rang once, then slipped into a digital graveyard. Emails bounced back with an auto-reply. Message received. Nothing further. His social accounts went private. Our mutual friends sent neutral texts. Hope you're doing okay. Subtext. We picked a side and it's not yours. A week after D-Day, I got a certified letter from a lawyer whose stationery smelled like mahogany. Mason wasn't filing for divorce. Yet. The letter simply transferred the lease to his name and refunded my half of the security deposit to a new checking account he'd opened in my name. Clean, surgical, almost compassionate. I packed that afternoon. Tessa offered her spare room, until her fiancé reminded her it was his home too. Bree said I could couch surf, but hinted I should start living solo to taste the independence I'd apparently craved. I moved into a studio the size of a generous elevator, walls still smelling of primer. First night I killed a centipede with a scented candle Mason had once bought during a farmer's market stroll. Irony tastes like lavender and regret. I tried to rebuild routine. Morning runs along the river, oat milk lattes, playlist of peppy You Got This anthems, but every song reminded me of Mason's 3-line mashups. I started checking his LinkedIn at 2 a.m., hoping for signs of struggle. Instead, I found a post. Excited to start the UX boot camp at 1871 growth season. Hundreds of likes, growth indeed. The investigation at work wrapped quietly. HR gave me a final written warning and mandated training. Conrad resigned via email and moved to Denver, according to rumor. My affair had evaporated into altitudinous thin air, leaving only the stench on my resume. The first real exposure to public shame arrived courtesy of Lena's wedding shower. I'd RSVP'd months before and decided to be brave. Surely Mason wouldn't blacklist me from family events. He was kind. Wrong. At the door, the planner, clipboard smile, told me my invitation had been retracted to preserve a drama-free environment. The pity in her voice weighed more than bricks. Standing on the sidewalk in a new dress I couldn't return, I scrolled through Instagram. There was Mason, arms slung around a woman with auburn curls at a rooftop volunteer event. Caption, Building Homes, Building Hope. The woman tagged Claire Mitchell. Mitchell? No. Later I'd learned she wasn't related. She just coincidentally shared the last name he'd soon reclaim from me. I texted Bree, "Who is Rooftop Girl?" She responded with a string of enlarged eye emojis, then, "He met her at the coding boot camp, apparently. Graphic designer, runs marathons, plays cello." My stomach folded into origami. Mason never liked running when I asked him to join races. Now he was apparently lacing up at sunrise. For someone else. Denial turned to detective mode. I created a Finsta, followed Claire's pottery account, mapped her weekend market schedule. Sunday, I accidentally bumped into her booth at the Randolph Street Fair. She was genuinely warm. "Do you need help picking a mug?" Up close, she had faint freckles and a calm energy Mason used to say I possessed. I bought a cup but couldn't bring myself to mention him. That night I drafted a 3-page apology letter to Mason, printed it on thick ivory paper, and hand-delivered it to the loft mail slot. I waited in a cafe across the street, heart jackhammering, hoping he'd read it and text. 2 hours later, a DoorDash courier arrived at my table with a small takeout bag. Inside, the letter shredded into confetti and a note in Mason's handwriting. "Return to sender, wrong address." The message was surgical. No malice, just finality. Outside, the loft lights glowed amber. Through the window, I saw Mason and Claire assembling IKEA shelves, laughing when a dowel rolled away. The domestic scene looked like a deep fake of my old life with new actors. I realized I was the only one still rehearsing a canceled show. I walked home through icy wind, phone buzzing with unread Slack pings. My reflection in dark storefronts looked less like the main character and more like an extra wandering out of frame. That night, I Googled how to let someone go who's already let go. None of the listicles mentioned what to do when their happiness feels like theft. A week later, Lena texted a single photo. Mason at Thanksgiving, Claire beside him, both wearing identical paper crowns. No caption. The family had issued its verdict by simply updating the cast. I thought rock bottom was a shredded apology. Turned out, rock bottom has a basement. After Lena's photo, I stopped sleeping. Nights stretched like audio without a waveform. I'd pace my studio counting cracks in the plaster, refreshing Claire's pottery feed, waiting for Mason to slip into a frame so I could hate myself fresh. Work noticed. My creative director pulled me aside. "Val, your copy reads like someone swallowed a panic attack." HR required a performance improvement plan. Conrad messaged once from Denver, some bland, "Hope you're well." I blocked him. Bree hosted a New Year's Eve party billed as fresh energy only. I arrived wearing a silver dress I couldn't afford, determined to sparkle hard enough to outrun sorrow. At 11:07 p.m., Mason walked in, invited by Dominic, our mutual friend, Claire on his arm. My throat closed. They looked easy together. She fixed his slightly crooked bow tie, and he tapped her nose. I clenched my champagne flute so tight the stem snapped, glass slicing my palm. People gasped. I laughed, insisted I was fine while blood dotted the tile like poppies. Midnight hit without me. I was sitting in the tub, clutching paper towels, listening to fireworks and strangers kissing beyond the door. When I emerged, Mason and Claire had left. Bree's boyfriend drove me to urgent care for 3 stitches. On the form I listed, kitchen accident. The next morning, Bree asked gently whether I needed help. I snarled that she'd invited Mason knowing I'd be there. She said the world wasn't my curated playlist. We didn't speak for a month. January thawed the sidewalks, but not the bruise on my reputation. Word got around about the bathroom breakdown and the blood. A Slack meme comparing my meltdown to a Wes Anderson scene circulated the office before HR killed it. Even Tessa took step back space. Her fiancé didn't like drama at dinner parties. My finances imploded. Half my stuff was still in storage because the studio couldn't fit it. Payments piled up next to therapy bills. I started tutoring community college students at night for extra cash. A gig Mason once volunteered for when we were future planning. Each session was an echo. Then came the restraining order warning. An email from Mason's lawyer. If I showed up uninvited or contacted Claire again, apparently my Finsta comments weren't as stealth as I'd thought, legal action would follow. It was worded clinically, but I could hear Mason's quiet baritone behind every clause. Stop, let go. Back in Indianapolis, my childhood bedroom felt like a time capsule smelling of teen perfume and participation trophies. Mom was kind but protective. Every question tiptoeing around the crater in my life. Dad mostly stayed silent, sliding me coffee and job listings. Nights I lay awake under glow-in-the-dark stars, audible proof that I'd regressed. I joined a local gym to avoid running into high school acquaintances. Lifting weights, I'd count reps and bargain with the universe. At 100 squats, maybe I could squat the memory of Mason holding someone else. One Sunday, I drove to Chicago for the last load from storage. While idling at a stoplight near our old block, I saw Mason and Claire exit a bakery, arms looped, a box of pastries between them. She wore the vintage leather jacket I'd once convinced Mason looked too edgy. Now it suited him. They laughed about something. Synchronized happiness. My chest tightened, but instead of driving off, I lowered the window. Cool March air hit my face. I almost honked. Almost. Instead, I watched a second longer, then pressed the gas and turned away, the steering wheel damp under my grip. That moment, The choice not to press the horn was my first micro step towards surrender. Of course, surrender isn't linear. Weeks later, I relapsed, scrolling Claire's Pinterest board until 3 a.m., hate-saving pot designs. But therapy had finally clicked. My therapist, Dr. Yoon, asked, "What if losing is the tuition you paid for a lesson you refused to audit?" I hated the metaphor. It stuck anyway. Spring churned into early summer. I got a remote copywriting contract that didn't care about Chicago gossip. I jogged along the Monon Trail, headphones off so I could hear my own breathing. I stopped checking LinkedIn notifications. Mason's feed faded under the algorithm. One evening, Mom found me on the porch, reading a paperback. She sat beside me, handed over mint tea, and said, "You know, your grandma used to say, wanting what you lost is easier than wanting what you have left." I didn't roll my eyes for once. That night, I unfollowed Claire's pottery account. Small, unspectacular keystroke. My pulse barely spiked. A month later, I realized I'd gone 7 straight days without mentioning Mason. Grief's volume had dimmed from stadium to elevator music. The silence felt spacious, not vacuum. I'd like to end this with a big cinematic flourish. Court dates dismissed, viral apology video. But real aftermath is quieter. It's donating the last box of succulents because you finally admit you're not a plant person without him. It's updating your phone's favorites list and noticing he isn't there and not adding him back. Sometimes on the drive between Indianapolis and Chicago for client meetings, I pass the exit for West Loop and let muscle memory twitch the wheel. But I keep going. The skyline still stabs something tender, yet it no longer bleeds. Last week, Lena emailed a formal announcement. Mason and Claire's engagement party in September. Small ceremony, big hearts. The invite included a line I recognized. Mason's favorite Gloria Steinem quote about writing the story you need to read. I closed the email without rage. I marked the date in my planner, not as something to attend, but as a reminder of the finality I once refused to believe. And yet a piece of me still narrates how things might have gone if I'd loved the life I had instead of betting on a life I couldn't describe. Maybe we'd be planning our own Italy trip. Maybe we'd be singing 3-line mashups to a baby in a sun-washed kitchen. Or maybe we'd have crashed anyway. Regret is a choose-your-own adventure where every ending is the same page. What I know, I traded devotion for dopamine, certainty for speculative possibility, calm love for chaotic novelty. The market corrected my hubris with interest. I still light lavender candles, but now I watch them burn all the way down instead of snuffing them halfway to meet someone else's stare. I'm learning to sit with discomfort instead of sprinting toward distraction. Therapy, trail runs, volunteer copywriting for an animal rescue nonprofit, small bricks in a life under renovation. Will I fall in love again? Maybe, but the next partner won't be a placeholder while I test drive imaginary cars. The next forever will walk through the front door, not wait in the garage until I'm done joyriding. Until then, I practice gratitude for what's still mine. Lungs that fill, fingers that type, parents who kept the porch light on, and a lesson burned so deep it glows in the dark. Sometimes learning costs everything. 3 months after deleting the last hidden screenshot of Claire's feed, I ran into Mason on accident that only a city's math could solve. Union Station, Friday rush, 2 rivers of commuters converging. He wore a linen shirt, sleeves rolled, engagement ring glinting on Claire's finger where she clasped his arm. They didn't see me. They were laughing at a private joke, the kind we once collected like seashells. For a nanosecond, I considered tapping his shoulder, some movie scene closure. Instead, I stepped aside, letting their momentum pass like a warm front. As they disappeared onto the escalator, I expected the familiar stab. It came, but softer, like scar tissue predicting rain. Back on the train, I opened the Notes app and wrote, "You survived the sight of him happy. That means you're healing." Will I attend their September party? Probably not. But I might send a donation to the housing charity they love, in both of our names, anonymous. That feels like balance. Dr. Yoon says forgiveness is unilateral. You release the debt even if the debtor never repays. I always thought that line was for saints. Turns out it's for survivors, too. So, tonight, before I blow out the candle, I'll whisper into the quiet loft of my childhood, "I forgive you, Valerie," and try to mean it. Then I'll let the smoke curl upward, a final exhale of a chapter I finally, irrevocably close. Epilogue of sorts. This very confession is my receipt. If some other woman stumbles across it at 2 a.m. while Googling, "Should I test my boyfriend?" let these paragraphs be the neon sign at the cliff's edge. I promise the view isn't worth the fall. 4,000 words can't catalog every heartbeat I gambled away, but they're enough to tell you this. Cherish the quiet devotion before curiosity burns it into noise.